Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is Feb 13, 2024. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure today to be here with Christina Ward. Where in the heck are you calling in from, Christina?
I am in beautiful Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being is an open mind and a giant heart.
Wow, how beautiful. I agree. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Um, as I get older, I realize that that can change and morph, but my one consistent is reading. For me, my brain takes in information best when I'm reading it versus listening or watching.
Totally agree. And a side question to that is, did you become a reader mainly one, because your parents told you to, two, they did as an example, or three, on your own?
It a little bit of both. My dad was a fantastic working class Vietnam combat vet who read stories to his kids every single night. I think and that hit the bugs for me. And then I started teaching myself to read based on that very early. So I was one of those kids who was allowed to go to the adult section when I was younger into the library.
How cool. Um, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I think that we have a tendency to want to explain mysteries. And with that mystery, we have to assign a reason to something. I think it's one of the reasons we invent gods. Because if a mystery is unsolvable, it has to be sacralized and then turned into something ritualized and beyond our basic knowing. Because we just can't accept not knowing something, so we make it into something holy.
Amazing. And then the rest of my life, I'm trying to unlearn everything I know. So it's a real complex uh, dichotomy there. So, do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it is innate, but not in everyone. I think there's a large portion of we can talk about American society that is very happy just to be in this kind of lull state of just low information, high entertainment. And then there's another subset that really want to know things, that are fascinated by just whatever bright shiny object, whatever bright shiny idea kind of catches their imagination. So I think that there's definitely, kind of the two types of people in the world.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
Um, th- Thoughts can create emotions. Uh, I'm one of those people that is very pragmatic. And so I don't like to have emotions rule thoughts, and neither do I like to have thoughts rule emotions. We're still poorly designed machines at best. So, you're never going to win every one of those kinds of heart versus mind battles.
Yeah. Really good. I appreciate how articulate and concise you are. It's a pleasure. Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I.
I don't know what I think until I've seen it verified,
Yeah,
whether that's by research or example or experience.
that is good. McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. But I like that you put it, see it verified, research, example, and experience. Really good words there. That's good. So, can humans think without language?
Theoretically, yes. I don't. I think in words, but I know there's people that think purely in images, and I think of that state of synthesia,
Yeah,
where people will like see color and things. So I don't do that myself, but at the same time, I know that folks do. So absolutely, yes, people can
yeah.
think without words.
Chomsky says the language is not just words, it's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
I think when language breaks down, again, I'm a person that's always a nuanced thinker in the way that there's lots of gray matter. It's always dependencies of how is it breaking down? Is it breaking down because the speaker has lost their own sense of language? Are they unmoored? Are they are they countered foreign language? I'm doing it right now. As I struggle to articulate, I start talking with my hands, which is something that, again, what will convey out of that is not the meaning, but definitely the intensity, the emotion behind that purity of thought that is still not quite expressed. So I think so for me personally, when it starts failing, I start to go to a physicality to try to see if I can search out and, and find those words floating in space somewhere.
Really good. Physicality is a great. One guy said, "What do you do when language breaks down?" He goes, "Group hug."
Funnily enough, it's something that runs in my family. My dad had it, is a form of just kind of a very humorous aphasia where he would, and my grandmother did it too. And I wonder, I'm waiting for my brain to do the same thing where we'd find the wrong noun. And to great humorous effect, but not intentional, where it'd be related, but not quite the same. And it happened a lot. Like, for example, as a kid, remembering like movie titles, we'd refer to the 80s Dances with Wolves was Dances with Chickens. Steel, you
That,
know, Steel Magnolias became Steel Petunias. And just so, those stick out in my mind. But I think that's a fascinating corollary to like,
yeah,
what does the language mean? Because there's always a difference between meaning and then contextual meaning. I don't know. I'm not one of those people. If I understand what someone is saying and they said the wrong word, I don't stop and correct them because I
right,
understood what they meant.
exactly. That's and the thing you said about hands and gesture is so important because I've interviewed people for 40 years. For 35 years, it was mainly audio cassettes. There were some, videotape would not, but now since Zoom and online, basically what we're doing is telephone television. And
I
we're live on TV worldwide right now. And what I do like is that there is our heads and our hands are seeable. That
right.
does
And look at how much nuance. Wait, so and I started getting excited, interrupting you, and you saw it before you heard it and stopped.
yeah,
And you get to see, our facial expressions. And so that combination, when we talk about language, as you start talking about language, this meaning gets so much richer when we see and interact in the conversation.
yeah. Your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling or more thinking beings?
I think the majority of people are more feeling beings.
Yeah.
Emotional regulation is a very complicated thing, and so most people aren't very good at it. And so so you get a lot more feelers out there.
Yeah. The funny thing is most people say, I think we're more feeling beings. 80% of people say, but I love Bridget Bardot says, when I think I don't make, I wouldn't know. I reversed it. When I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, good luck. How can you shut off your brain from thinking when you're doing this incredible physical thing? And, go ahead. Yeah.
No, but that's really fascinating because the intentionality of that, of purposely disconnecting the thought from the act and the feeling, is essentially at the core of what's kind of called tantric sex practices.
Yeah.
That's the idea of that, being able to foster that much feeling and intensity of energy, to focus it on just the act itself, can essentially, and many people believe that you're generating a huge amount of energy into the world that you can then manifest and direct.
It's amazing you said that. No one's ever said that. And it really enlightened me because I usually give the Bridget Bardot and then I follow it up with good luck. How can you not think when you're making love? And I follow it up as like when people meditate, they go, now think about not thinking. So you actually went there from meditation to tantric. That was really a good crossover. So here's two Alan Turing questions from the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Well, that makes an assumption of soul. That right there. So I'm going to disagree. I'm not a religious person, and so just the concept of soul is discordant with how I think about things.
Yeah. The second Turing is, can machines think?
No, they cannot.
Yeah.
And that's, the great, everyone is the great bugaboo of the day, right? AI. Um, it is not generative. It's not
Yeah.
creating anything. It's regurgitative.
Yeah. Very good. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Meaning,
Yeah.
within meaning, you get contentment, and contentment is true happiness. Happiness, I think, it is it it's a hobgoblin that people chase, and they lose something of their own self in that pursuit of happiness, because they don't know what happiness really is. It's an undefined, ill-defined state. Contentment. Strive for contentment, and you'll be surprised how happy you are.
Wow. See, it's really me and you versus the wording on the questions. And you know, and it's great, because that's what I like, to refine the words. I sometimes just keep asking them the same words, but there's different words than happiness that could be substituted in there. But I like that dichotomy. I think I got it from Christine McKenna. A lot of my great questions I regurgitated from her, and I appreciate the wording, but I also appreciate how people, like this one is, does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I think it's a created
Yeah.
existence. If we see people who have, whether through brain injury or through developmental issues during gestation with brain injuries, that are unable to process consciousness in the similar way, but yet the physicality, the body still works, the brain, so it's hard to get in that kind of brain space aside from just the physical measuring of brain waves. So I do think that consciousness in that way is definitely created by the brain, because there have been studies of people coming out of these deep vegetative states that talk about having created essentially worlds within their own brain.
Amazing. My friend, homeless, kind of wild ass, druggy musician friend, I hadn't seen him in a year or two, and I saw him the other day, and he says, dude, I got beaten up and I was in a coma for a week. And I was like, whoa. And, we talked about he's doing okay. I says, what happened during your coma? Did you have anything go through your head? He goes, I went to college and got my PhD. I was like, oh my God.
Well, and I think, and that's where it becomes really interesting. Some of the new research that is really the old research on the brain chemistry barriers with psychedelic drugs, with the so-called God drugs, the ethnogenic kind of drugs, because
Yeah.
they're creating these new neural pathways and rewiring existing ones to essentially create new realities for humans. And
Yeah.
it's an extraordinary new frontier. I'm very fascinated by what that research is showing.
Oh yeah. And then we could do 2 salons on tripping through you, or tripping on utopia. Have you seen the new book? You know
I,
about it?
I know about it. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
waiting to. Yeah.
the New Yorker and New York Times articles are worthy. The Terry Gross interviewing the author is really concise and good, but the best is Nora Bateson's letter to the editor to the New York Times. She sort of corrects the whole thing in like 4 concise sentences. I mean, not corrects, but just like puts it in a really good perspective.
Well,
But
I'm going to seek that out. I haven't read that letter yet.
yeah,
I'm going to now.
yeah. But well, the other thing about my friend James is, I said to him once, yeah, you could play in my band. I don't have any money, but I could pay you with, I find pot, because I knew he liked pot. He says, oh, that's cool. I says, but, I'm not responsible, because if the pot has been treated, I can't be responsible. I'm not testing it or anything. And he goes, all the better.
That is a brave soul, and I'm not sure I have that level of, like, bravery of,
Right.
go
Yes.
into I'm not a cliff diver. I'm not
Right.
I'm not one of that's not part of my personality.
No, most people are like that. Like, what? Okay, so what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of thought.
Yeah. There's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right. Thank God. Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
The tool for, dismantling the house. Huh, that is a great question to think about for just a moment of that I was always raised into kind of this of like destroy from within, subvert,
Yeah.
subvert. And so I'm trying to really process that and think about it because I'm not sure if there are new tools.
Yeah.
In my mind, they're all the same tools.
Yep.
I don't think we've really invented tools beyond, hammers, levers, right? And wheels. Everything
Yeah.
is just a variation on that.
Yeah. No, that's good. What new toy do you suggest?
A toy. Wow. Um, I think toys that are open-ended and, I have to think about a friend of mine is actually a toy designer, I mean, and a game designer,
Yeah.
and she and I talk a lot about that idea of a to be a toy, it has to have enough, um open-ended questions about how the thing works to be able to be engaging for people. So I don't know if I can name a thing, but that's what it would be, I think, for the newest toy. It needs to be so open-ended that the imagination can really grab onto it and make it its own thing.
Yeah. Christina, you're really a wordsmith because one of my favorite answers was the guy goes, well, I'm walking down the path and it's the next thing I find, like a stick or something. Then toy is open ended is really a great 2 words. I love that. So, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Oh, it's so pedestrian. I think about, the what I have to do the next day.
Yeah.
It's such a pedestrian thing because I work with books and work with people, make authors, writing books besides writing myself, and I take that responsibility quite seriously because if anybody's created anything, um, and you're the person essentially like a midwife getting it out into the world in a way,
Yeah.
and that's to me is a huge responsibility. So I do that's usually what I think about. I think about how am I going to get this person's creative piece, their art, their writing out into the world in a way that um, gives it the space that people can read it, because that's always my concern is when I fight any author I worked with will tell you this is I will always fight for the book. I'm on the book side.
Wow. Book
And
side.
so, authors sometimes get in their
Smart.
own way from their ideas, and I'm always going to advocate for the book itself.
Smart. Where'd you get your work ethic from?
Um, I come from a long line of poor, working class truck drivers, factory workers, farmers, and junk dealers.
Yeah.
And so that it's just bred in the bone that you have to do it yourself, that there's no free lunch. You better, if you want it, you better get it yourself.
Junk dealers. One of my heroes is Mr. Sweeney in Green Acres.
I love him. You know, and it's funny, I have old pictures. I'm kind of like the family, the kin keeper. And so it's great. I've got pictures of my great, I think it's either double great or triple great grandfather's junk store photos from like that. So yeah, a long
That
line
is
of junk dealers.
so cool. Yeah, because I love work ethic is most people, I mean, 99.9% say their parents. They're and about the third paragraph on Wikipedia's entry for work ethic, it says this could be a scam from consumer culture.
I guess I don't look at it as like so there are people that work hard because they're looking for status markers. They're looking
Yeah,
for these external status markers. So they
yeah,
work hard to try to like show that. And I'm not sure we all crawled out of the same primordial ooze. So I'm not sure what we're trying to prove with our Mercedes and fancy bits.
yeah.
Um, but we all have our internal engines that cause us to work hard. For
Yeah,
me, it comes down to, if I don't do it, there's not really someone else who's going to do it.
there you go. Beautiful. McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Christina, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Ego, pure
Yeah,
ego. I mean, if you've created something, most people, that they don't have a sense of detachment about their creation, about their art,
yeah,
and they look at it as an extension of their own self.
yeah.
And when we're looking at that, as we do our children, right? They're perfect. They're perfect, and we don't think about the unintended consequences. To me, it's always like the difference between like theoretical science and applied science. Theoretical science, great. Applied science, eh,
Yeah.
could use a little work there.
Wow. Really good distinction. Do artists have moral obligation?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have a moral obligation to yourself, your values.
Yeah.
And if you have really crappy values and you're loyal to that and the morality of it, then you'll get judged, which fairly so. But yeah, there's a responsibility.
Wow. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Old ideas.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't even pause for a moment. New
Yeah.
ideas are great. Old ideas, I think, are inspiring, and I think we should learn from them. So I'm not dismissing it out of hand,
Yeah.
but just taking an old idea without putting it into the mixer of new, um, again, causes problems.
Can you conjure up your earliest memory or one of them?
Sure.
What is it?
Um, I am quite young, and my sister is throwing a temper tantrum. And my sister, Irish twin, she's 11 months younger than I am, throwing a temper tantrum in the back of the car on the highway, to such an extent my dad pulls over and my mother gets out and fills her baby bottle with Pepsi. And that memory is so cemented, because I didn't get any Pepsi. And I think so she was 2 and I was maybe 3.
Oh my God, that is a story. Is
So
yeah, is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
a curse.
Wow, to elaborate. 99% of people go, "Oh, what's a blessing?" And then they kind of go, "Well, it could be a curse depending on." But you just said curse, so suss that out.
I think that, and again, this has been proven in psychological studies and sociological studies, is the way brains work from our most lizard brain self, is that we hold memories of pain and trauma and fear much more closely into our psyche than we do of the good things.
Yeah.
And so this memory then starts informing without, if you're not internally, kind of interrogating yourself in your memories. So that memory we have in our, again, poorly designed carcasses is often a curse to so many people, because their future present selves are burdened, and because they're using that memory, that faulty memory, that hard memory that's supposed to save us from poisoned mushrooms and predators on a savanna, has not really evolved very well for the curse of modernity. So in my mind, yeah, memory is definitely a curse.
Wow. Tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
Um, I've mentioned my dad a few times, and I would say that he was probably the biggest influence, um, as watching someone who was trying to make sense of his world and then the world at large without academia. So, he had a barely high school education and was an airborne ranger, but that didn't discount that he had a level of intelligence and sought out
Wow.
reading and doing that. So I think that was the model, to say that, there is always a barrier. Someone will always gatekeep something, and that is not the reason or excuse to not pursue what you're interested in, and what you see as where you can make some impact in the world.
Wow, how cool. Now, same question outside your immediate family.
Yeah. Mrs. Ernestine Parr, who was my seventh grade public school teacher. Um, at that time, growing up, people, most people think about racism as a very Southern thing and forget that us Northerners had some serious issues with it. Our Milwaukee public schools were not desegregated until 1976 under court order. And one of the ways they desegregated was by bringing in Black teachers to white schools.
Wow, not students,
Uh,
just the
they did that too. So there was
Oh,
swaps, but they would bring, but it was a lot. So for a lot of white kids, it was your first interaction up close and personal with a Black person in schools. And
wow.
Mrs. Ernestine Parr, she was from Georgia. She marched with Dr. King, and it was eye-opening. She had such a great influence in my life. As I mentioned earlier, I was an early reader, and she gave me all the rest of the class was reading something else, and then she gave me a copy. She brought me a copy of Alex Haley's The Autobiography of Malcolm X.
Yeah,
That's what you should give every 12-year-old. You should. I
choose.
mean, so she was probably the outside is to learn it, learn it,
Wow.
keep learning.
You are so good with words. I really got a picture of both of them in my head from the words you described. It was really beautiful. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Again, funnily enough, yes, no. In a mixed marriage, as we make jokes about, my dad was really, atheistic and his people were all very, kind of blasé atheistic. My mother was Roman Catholic, and so for the first few years, we had to go through the motions. But she was a bad Catholic, so that was an easy thing to break from. We went to Catholic schools for a few years out of tradition, and we were asked to leave because my dad wouldn't convert. And I think it was by like second grade, he was counteracting like some of the Catholic programming at home. And I remember it well because they called him into the office after I had announced to our second grade classroom going through, catechism stuff that Jesus, Muhammad, and Buddha were brothers of the same God. And that did not fly.
Whoa. um, do you pray?
No.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Gotcha.
Gotcha. That is great. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Oh no, evil people exist. That again, it's our brains. We are created through influence and chemistry, and evil is a construct. It is not just an ambient form. I mean, everybody loves this notion of evil being a separate entity because then we don't have to think about our own human behaviors. We get to externalize and otherize our worst selves and the manifestations of the worst people of the worst self by just dismissing it as evil or possessed by evil. No, it's purely human.
How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up a few thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I think that's a nice concept, hard in practice. Um, you know, and we have to think, I'm always a semantical person, is sometimes the idea of a nemesis can be really empowering as the Fellini thing. And not necessarily an enemy, just a nemesis, someone
Yeah.
that helps drive things. Whereas I think an outward enemy, then in my mind, I'm defining that as someone who bears you ill will, like knowingly bears you ill will. And that to me is dealt with humor, kindness, in a very strategic way. And I'm thinking of Marianne Faithfull sang a song written, I think it was Goffin and King, Something Better. And there's a great line that says, smile at your jailers until they grow weak.
Oh my God. That is good. You know, Hafiz has that poem I love. The jailer drops the keys in front of the door of the jail, so that the person inside the cell can reach down and get the keys and let himself out.
Yes, we're all trapped in these puzzle prisons of our minds of these enemies, and you know that, and this idea, this notion, when you talk about Alan Watts, is that he was so tuned into notions of what suffering really was.
Yeah.
And I think that it's I find it really interesting and fascinating in this the modern kind of therapy culture that we have in the United States at the moment. Of It's almost like a misery Olympics. There are people seeking out enemies and seeking again to externalize things that they do have control over. And I find that really interesting. Again, to the Watts point of giving someone that much power over you.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Wow. And so Nassim Taleb says games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. My friend said, well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson says, when the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
No, not at all. Because punishment, there's a morality involved, and morality is nuanced and gray.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking of like the modern American carceral state, is that's not really punishment. So someone does something bad for whatever their own internal reasons, and the punishment is what? What is the effect of that punishment?
Yeah.
Nothing at all. It's
Yeah.
just they're locked away. So I think as a society, if we were more honest with ourselves to say, well, we're not punishing with prison, we're just removing those bad actors from society for them to create their own society. That is, I think, a more accurate description. This notion of punishment is, I think, rooted very much in kind of Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good answer. And I met this kid on the boardwalk in Venice, and he spent 80% of his life in jail. I said, so what is it like? HBO, cell phones, and the drug of your choice? And he goes, yeah, most of the time. So it's like, what?
There's a story that just popped in my head that was told to me by my father-in-law, who is much older. Milwaukee historically was a very German city, and so during World War II, we had some big POW camps here. Not high-level Nazis, but
Yeah,
mostly Wehrmacht, like foot soldiers.
yeah,
And again, so again, the nuance. Um, they didn't want to bring any high-level people here because, again, we're so German. But my father-in-law was recounting as a teenager, they would go to the big prison camp, which was at the far corner of the airport, and there's picnics because the guys in the prison camp had cousins that were living right in town because, again, heavy German city. And so the families would bring like picnic lunches, and the guys could sit on the other side of the fence, and they could get caught up on family gossip and share a meal. And were they had probably very Nazified, fascistic ideas to some extent. I'm sure they did, but at the same time, they were still young men caught up in fighting and taking orders, being drafted. And that to me is a great example of like just how out of touch we are with the realities of what a jail means, what a fence means, what a prison really means.
yeah.
It's really just about separating someone from their family, from their support system, and from their society.
Which is the opposite of trying to rehabilitate them, or
Ex-
just give them a chance to rehabilitate themselves, or
Right.
get
And
over something.
And
Yeah,
you mentioned earlier about like heroes and winning things. And again, what a lousy state of existence if
yeah,
that and especially capitalist American culture is very much about winners and losers.
Yeah.
but with a very erroneous assumption that we're all starting from the exact same place.
Yeah. So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?"
I think it goes to kind of a little bit we were talking about earlier about who people who are creative versus people who are not. There's creators and there's consumers. And in seeing fictional stories told, it allows humans to develop empathy. It
Yeah.
allows us to develop those skills because I don't think they're always natural outside of our immediate blood family. And and obviously absent in many blood families.
Yeah.
And so us telling stories helps make our world smaller and more understandable.
Yeah. But what you said is a project I'm researching in can art stop war? And most people think that humans are naturally violent or inclined to kill because of survival, or this whole thing is like we're hardwired for violence. And Maria Gimbutas, the great archaeologist and anthropologist, said she could prove that there were cultures that had no violence, but people go, no way, because there's that old line, oh, that war, we had to have that war, you know and so just this idea of, is are humans more hardwired for cooperation or more hardwired for conflict? And
Cooperation. I
yeah,
think they truly are. I love what Charles Fourier, the great, the French utopianist,
yeah,
had in reimagining a world. He had rethought what war should be, and it's delightful. And he felt that if there was a nation state or group of tribe of people who had conflict for whatever reasons, is they essentially should have a cook-off. They should cook the cuisine of representing their people, and then all of those people eat it and then just make a judgment of what is best. And I love that idea because in sharing food, it is an act of trust
yeah,
from from the very basics that I'm not going to poison you, you're not going to poison me, and we're going to sit down and we're going to share this sandwich. Um, and from there, that's how we start building community and society, and that's how you end wars. And sadly, there are people that have a vested interest in making conflict.
yes. Industrial military complex. Yes, indeed. That was really enlightening, man. I need that for my essay, man. That was, because the one guy says, "What do Robin Williams?" I put it in the this article. He said we should fight wars with rubber chickens and say your mama wears army boots and throw a rubber chicken at him. But that again is the humor you brought up earlier.
Yeah.
But food. One friend said you should sit down and have a pizza together. Conflict resolution, sharing food.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
think about the stories from World War One. Was that Christmas 1914 at the front line near the Ardennes, where the German soldiers and the British soldiers kind of they themselves just created an impromptu ceasefire and détente around Christmas. They had a shared reason to stop and pause, and they started that exchange by sharing each other's food, their rations with each other.
Wow. How amazing. Um, so Christina, walk us through where's your tipping point where you said, I want to be a writer? I mean, you're reading, you talked about your dad in reading books, being a reader. Where did you go? I can do that.
I think that it was more of an action of having ideas and trying to figure out how to get those ideas out of my head to anyone else. Um, and early, again, Catholic schools, I often conflated writing with the physical handwriting, when my handwriting's awful. And so that idea that I couldn't write was because I couldn't physically do it very well. And it took me a while to figure out that I could try to the ideas that I was synthesizing in my head, I could just write them down ideally. And it takes time though to be able to teach yourself the discipline of thinking, of how to think and how to think critically and logically in a way that can then make sense to other people. And I think that that for me took a long time. I'm not formally trained. I didn't go through the MFA industrial complex to, that which is that's my judgment on fiction, and you're seeing a lot of writing that goes to style, and it's very, very specific in how modern writing is. And mine is not like that because I don't have the taint of graduate school or anything like that on me. It was all self-taught about how am I going to get this idea into a cogent form. And that's really the impetus for why I started writing and why I still write.
Did you, but I don't, what is that? I'm sorry, I don't know. What's an NFA?
Oh, MFA, Masters of Fine.
MFA. I thought you said N.
M.
MFA.
You get a little bit of my Midwestern accent there.
Dude, I'm there. I was raised in Michigan. I should have caught that. So did you go to college?
I think one semester.
Wow. So you are self-taught writer.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I went to, one semester, and again, poor working class. And even then in the early 80s, it was expensive.
Yeah.
And why go to college when you have punk rock to save you?
That is a great state. Yeah, Reverend Al put out Flipside. I wrote for Flipside a little, and my favorite line is, "Don't sell out, sneak in."
Oh, that's great. That is a great line.
Yeah. So, a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. When you're writing one of your books, what role does intention play in your creative process?
Everything. Because as I was talking about, I have an idea. I've done research. I have some big ideas. And so that intentionality is really critical, especially in nonfiction. And again, in fiction stories, that may, someone else may have a different take on it. But with nonfiction, I'm very intentional because I want anyone who's reading what I'm writing to see what I see. I want to show you my math, so to speak. I want people to see that this idea didn't come out of nowhere. There was a whole process to get to that point. And that process can be enjoyable. And if you're writing correctly, meaning writing for readers, not for yourself, then you can be intentional and take people to where you want to go. My favorite, people tell you to imagine your ideal reader, or my imagined ideal writer is someone who's sitting at the bar, right? Like a Studs Terkel, who's just going to tell you a really damn good story.
Yes.
And that's the intention.
That is heavy. And you answered this, but I want to ask it anyways.
Sure.
Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your reader when you're writing? I'm
thinking of the reader only in so much as will the reader get what I'm saying. So I'm not, and it's not in a way of like, oh, do I need to dumb it down, or do I need to sprinkle some $10 words in there? No, it's never like that. It's like, so in my mind, the audience is just that, will people understand what I'm trying to say?
There's a thing McLuhan talks about, everything we invent extends some humanness or human sensorium. Knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter in a camera, a projector extends our eyelid. Even say non-tangible philosophy or religion might be an extension of consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? What humanness, whether it's a pen or a keyboard?
It's an extension of my brain, but not the messy brain, not the back parlor, but the front parlor. That is all nice for guests.
That is sweet. You're a metaphor, a magical metaphor. That was beautiful. Ready for guests. So let's go for the other kind of things you pursued: food, transgressive art, and publishing. I mean, those are sort of your three other sub callings besides writing, right? Mm-hmm. So what was the tipping point to pursue food as a topic in your books?
So food to me is it's a universal. I kind of talked about sharing meals. It's a universal experience. Humans need food as much
Yeah.
as some kind of crazy guru might tell you otherwise. We need it.
Yeah.
And it is a universal human experience. And of course, our own personal experiences inform what we're interested in later in life. I mentioned I grew up poor, but I also got to spend most of my summers with my paternal grandmother on her very rural farm. Um, they didn't get indoor plumbing until Grandpa died in 1974. It was, outhouses and pump for water. Um, and so that became a really interesting, and I think my introduction into the dichotomy of food from the dirt and food that you grow versus when you're back in the city at the heyday of the 70s and, box macaroni and cheese. So I'm always very interested in contrasts. And that to me, my life, I was realized I was living this contrast from, little house on the prairie out to, little foxes kind of. So it was a weird thing. And I think, and that's what really started. My mother's a terrible cook of that time period when you're just warming things up out of a can or a box. And to me, then that made me more interested in learning, where did food come from? Who was making it? Where? And I'm always very interested in the origin of things and the stories behind these things. And that's where that intersection where the food really became interesting to me.
Really great. And so transgressive art, you said punk rock. So what came first? Did you discover your pursuit to the history of food before punk rock? Where or was that after punk rock? And is punk rock the transgressive art part?
So I was always interested in food, even, younger. The transgressive and punk kind of went together. Is that you're constantly. I'm one of those. I'm kicking against the pricks. I'm kind of the always questioning and rejecting this mainstream conformist society that did not allow for interesting and new ideas. I used to, even as a kid, it made me angry. So I always had that transgressive urge, and in finding punk rock was a great then outlet and then platform to explore that transgressive urge.
Did that's where you found publishing through like zine culture, or
Yeah,
how'd you
zine.
find? Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
zine culture, weekly magazines, art publishing, making art books, creating art books.
Yeah,
Mail art was highly influential. And then part of that punk rockness was it became its own information network. It's a very viral information network. I mean, these great, if you were playing in a band, you could go with like a letter of introduction, so to speak, or a phone call and said, "Hey, this guy vouches for me. Can I sleep on your couch?" And
yeah.
the rule you could. That was it was a really weirdly wonderful primitive network. Um, and that again started to exchange ideas and feed off of each other and then foster. And as everyone grows and matures, you mentioned earlier with Feral House and Amok Publishing, so you could take these things if you were a terrible musician like I was and still am, to go and be transgressive in other art forms and to find that outlet to get your yayas out.
How cool. What's the three punk rock groups that had the biggest impact on you growing up?
I'm one of those. There's kind of then genre of punk and different. I'm
Yeah,
very socio-political punk. So for me, the Mekons, and I have the great pleasure of knowing John Langford and Sally Timms
yeah,
now, who still have the same politics.
yeah,
Crass to me was really influential, and so were the Dead Kennedys.
yeah. Yeah, I was lucky. I tried to interview Jello for years, and I finally got him and had him on my podcast. I was really lucky. So beautiful. I spoke with Michael Apted 40 years ago. I said, "Why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast?" Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but it really flourished in the 80s with MTV, to the point where Marty Scorsese said, "I cut my films faster because of MTV." So Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. So I asked this question with the bias: can we really learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Brainwashing. It's because if you and I'm going to back that up with data. So we look at modern culture where people like, so if you're, I'm a terrible television watcher. I
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
not because the cuts are so fast, though they are, but they're designed, these miniseries, these overly long productions are designed specifically because they know people aren't really focused. They're multitasking. They're on their phones and they're watching something. And so they're prolonged so they can get that eyeball, so they can get that revenue. And so uh, people are unaware that you're being manipulated to quote unquote
yeah,
multitask. And statistically, this has been in the news this past week, our reading comprehension levels for at high school, college level kids are in the toilet
yeah,
because we cannot process information that fast. We just cannot.
yeah.
And what we're losing is our ability to comprehend ideas.
So well put, man. You're my guru teacher. I'm
Well,
learning so
thank
much.
you.
I mean, so this is funny because Craig Baldwin says, "What about Evelyn Wood's speed reading?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Now the follow-up question is, can humans literally multitask?
No, we can try.
Yeah.
We don't. So you can, sure, you can multitask. You can do two things poorly at the same time. That's what multitasking is.
What was the motive of the cave artist? Your hunch, your guess.
Um, uh, I have a couple ideas about that, and then they're contrary to each other because it's a fun kind of navel gaze experiment. Um, I think that, again, we talked about early people, is that idea of documenting their own history, telling a story to someone who wasn't there. And so those cave images, the images are a way to convey, this is my experience,
Yeah.
and I'm going to share that with you. But conversely, I could also make an argument for fantasy of, it's what, the Ur fisherman's tale of, because if you see like the Lascaux cave paintings, there's many, many animals and the hunters are triumphant. And, is there anything sadder than the empty-handed hunter coming home?
Yeah. Wow. That's Herzog's film on cave painting was based on the New Yorker article where they said, the cave painters invented 15 things, and one of them was spray paint, and blow your hand imprint,
Hmm.
Banksy stenciling. And so basically the people who invented art were 15-year-old taggers because that was the life expectancy then was 15 years old.
And it comes to that. So I think it's really fascinating. A lot of these, the transgressive urge, this urge to create comes, starts in youth. It starts
Yeah.
with young, when, again, science shows from brain scans that our executive function isn't fully formed yet. So you need almost just that freewheeling internal permission to do the thing. And that's what teenage brains give us.
It's really true because most artists grow up and they're trying to get back to their youthful child innocence to create their art.
Right? Isn't that what the core of what every therapist says too, right?
Yeah.
Speak to the child within.
So some people say, that cave art is like documented. So we're doing a research project on archiving. And
Ah,
so the word archive, 1400s, keep safe from harm. 1600s, 200 years later, what we think it of is record preserved as evidence. And then so we know that the Egyptians would keep stuff in their coffin with them after they died. But we do have this tendency to understand Eastern philosophy, be here now, Ram Dass. In fact, Wyndham Lewis said, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. So, why is that? I know why we collect. I mean, me and you are researchers. We love books. We love libraries. I also love the future of saying destroy all libraries and museums. But I go to a library every day. I don't want it destroyed, but I
yeah.
like that they thought it up. But is this need or want to archive more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate. I think that it's part of the how we create identity. We're going to pick up a rock that has meaning. It has and save it. We're making, cave paintings of our hands to prove that we existed. So all of that archive material, that urge to collect, comes from, I think, to that I is a preservation of to prove that we were here. As you were talking about like what other folks had said, it brought to mind an old kind of a classic sci-fi book, The Canticle for Leibowitz, right? If you remember Canticle for Leibowitz, which is, there's a lot to it, but one of the main premises is that all archives are destroyed. There is nothing left except for the one man who finds a fragment of paper. And a whole world is built off of that fragment of paper, which is then later revealed to be just a partial grocery list.
Wow, who's the author on that? Do you
Oh,
know?
shoot. No, I'm terrible at remembering the names
Okay,
of
well,
authors,
we
but
can
the
look.
title, yeah, Canticle for Leibowitz is the title of the book.
Very good. Thank you for that. Truly enlightening. And you brought up the word identity. I'm just curious. Wait, let's do a finish archive first. Do you have specific plans for your own archive?
I
I know
do.
you. What is it?
I do. I laugh because this is recent. We have a kid who just bought a house and informed us they hate all our stuff, and so which makes you really think about all your stuff. Um, and so yeah, for all the books and things is we have a local like a lending library free, and I'm going to take everything, even the most valuable ones, and they're going to be given to like the nonprofit literacy thing, and just they then can choose, because I'll be dead, I won't care. So if you want to give a very fancy book to a little kid to take home and scribble in, fantastic. If you want to sell it off and maybe pay a teacher's salary for a week, fantastic. But that's where all the books are going to go.
Beautiful. So now what was my follow-up? I forgot it. Okay, archiving. Anyways, it will come back, I guess. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Important to whom?
You answered a question with a question. You win, Christina. That's what this series is all about. You know, the Irish, they go, you Irish people answer questions with questions. We go, we do, eh?
Wait, it's a great. So I mentioned that I'm a fan of yours and your Finnegan group, because I'm does anyone really understand Joyce fully? No, it's a lifetime of
Yeah,
ambition. But part of that, the beauty of that, is that language, that Irish language, the cadence, the style originating in the Gaelic, is that the affirmative is such a vague and nebulous thing, especially in Gaelic, and so it outs itself in how Irish and all of us of Irish extraction somehow use questioning and language and affirmations. I'm
right.
fascinated by that.
But I mean, put it into the context you want, just off the top of your head. What's more important, conviction or compromise? I know you
Compromise.
want to put it into your own context, whatever you
No,
feel.
no, compromise, because we're not hermits. We have to exist with other people, and existence with other people means de facto compromise.
Dude, that it's amazing because I ask all these questions. I want people to be honest and just answer. I want to entertain all points of view, but I have a bias. I want the answers to be a certain way sometimes. And that's my oldest question. My favorite was, what's more important, conviction or compromise? This guy says, depends on what you mean by important. But I want to hear compromise. 80% I hear conviction. So it's amazing that you said that. Now I know the two. Before we go on, the two back questions I forgot. One was identity. You brought up that word identity. Both McLuhan and Krishnamurti say violence is the human search for identity.
Oh.
Any thoughts on that line?
Yeah, that's wow, that's brilliant. I hadn't heard that before. Um, it- I I can see it more as a metaphor,
Yeah.
um, especially if we think about even just the physical nature of birth. It's violent. It's a violent
Wow.
process, and so from that, everything is grown and bloomed from that violence.
But how do you mean? Because some people go, "What do you mean? Birth is glorious."
No,
But
it
you're
isn't. It's not. It's gross. I've done it. It's not fun.
that is great. Okay, so the other one was narrative. Hollis Frampton, experimental filmmaker, said narrative storytelling. Narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
And I hope I forget to die. That would be lovely. Um, but I think that you can forget to die. I
Yeah,
think because when we talk about what type of death, it's mostly we focus on tragic, sudden, violent death, but most death is a slow fading. It's
yeah,
just a slow fade out. And I think the that is not forgetting to die. That's the opposite of that. When people just slowly fade away, those folks, more people should forget to die and just keep going, going
yeah,
and going and going. I think
yeah.
the very tangential is the musician, very fun punk musician Mojo Nixon just died
Oh
last week.
God, isn't that heartbreaking? Yeah,
It was heartbreaking for his family, but he died after playing a great show, hanging
yeah.
out with people, and, that is a life lived. That is someone who forgot to die, and that is fantastic.
Really well put, because I just read the New York Times obit and they gave him justice. And they basically said that because the other there's many people who've done that, but uh, uh, now I can't think of his name. The guy from Atlanta, he's playing at the big theater there, and every um, jam band is in praise of him, Colonel Bruce Hampton. And he's playing, and 3/4 of the show, it's his tribute to his 70th or 80th birthday. Boom, he falls over dead. And they just keep playing. It's like
Perfect.
Colonel Bruce went out the way he wanted to go out,
Yeah, I think everyone should do that. It should be you forget to die and just keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing
Yeah,
your thing.
yeah. No, well, that's also Kurosawa. That was in the New York Times a bit too. They said, how did you want to die? And he says, well, I want to be on the set of a movie I'm making. And I go, cut, boom. You've accomplished a lot. In your accomplishments in general, how do you rate these three elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
No, they're equal. It's
Yeah,
it's equal.
yeah,
Anyone who's achieved any outside definition of success is lying to the world if they're saying that one of those things was, more than the other.
it's good.
I'm such a lucky person, and my ambition and skill, then parlayed that luck into something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, you're brilliant. That's good because I like the golfer Gary Player says the more you practice, the luckier you get.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And luck also, I think a lot of people will use luck almost as a dirty word,
yeah,
as, that, oh, you got lucky, like
yeah,
it's some sort of admonishment. And I look at it, luck is kind of an opened eye, open your third eye, right? The luck is everywhere. And
yeah,
that takes the skill and to teach yourself, how do you recognize opportunity and how do you recognize when the luck is your way?
yeah.
And too many people do that. They've already said no to themselves, so they're not gonna be able to say yes to anything else.
Yeah. T.S. Eliot said poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Um, it's hard Milwaukee's, means so lots of swearing. There's lots of swearing in that internal dialogue in a very pleasant way, so not a negative. It's a raucous, raw language, and it's rough, and it's tumble, and, offensive to probably outside listeners, but I like that kind of, just kind of rawness, and that's how
Yeah.
my brain initially works. It's a real, like, rick'em, rack'em, rock'em kind of a language that floats in my head.
So well put. Bleecker Bob said, I'm not an asshole. I'm from New York.
Yeah, see? And I look at it sometimes it's, sometimes I'll say a harsh truth to folks and not intentional to be harmful,
Yeah,
but it's sometimes you just have to say, "You know what? That paragraph isn't working. That outfit, that color doesn't like look great on you." Not
yeah,
unsolicited. I'm not saying
yeah,
that, not just
yeah,
a random jerk. That's a jerk behavior.
yeah.
But I think we mask kindness. We use kindness as a mask a lot to just be I'm searching for the word, to be a coward.
It's the Proust question: on what occasion do you lie?
Yeah, on what occasion do I lie? Um, I try to tell the truth all the time, and it comes out of a childhood thing, getting caught lying once and about something and realizing that the ramification of the lie is always worse than the lie itself.
That's it.
And so I strive never to tell a lie. I try to tell a kind truth, but never a lie. I know, and that sounds really hoity-toity, but
No,
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 it's really something. So there is no occasion I would find myself wanting to or conveniently lying.
it's really well put because they asked Tom Waits, on what occasion do you lie? And he says, I didn't know I needed an occasion. And see, that's a like sort of, smart assy.
It
But
is.
the woman who dressed movie stars, she said, that's called manners. So that's like a white lie. And, most people say on what occasion you lie, they go to protect the other person's feelings.
But do we really have to protect all these feelings all the time?
That's what I'm saying. You laid it out on the table. Like that's almost another lie. You said,
It is.
yeah, and then once you lie once, then you got to back it up and keep lying.
And I've got better things to keep in my head. I don't wanna keep track of lies.
That's it.
I've got other stuff I want in there.
That is beautiful. That's right. So, two of my film heroes, they say, ignore yourself. That's their mantra. Jonas Mika says, there is no self expression. In Cecil Taylor, jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Um, it's expression, using using the tools. I'm a
Yeah.
fan of a sentiment. I'm a fan of the English playwright Joe Orton.
Yeah.
And Joe Orton was always he had 2 lines. I actually have it tattooed on my arm because it's so meaningful. Yeah. It says, "Cleanse my heart. Give me the ability to rage correctly." And
Wow.
right? And then the other thing that I take from Orton is he always said that really to be a good artist, be a good writer, you have to be able to detach from the work, detach from your ego and detach. And that is part of it. And so if you are so immersed in your own feelings and your own thing, you're not going to be able to create that art. You're not going to be able to do those things. And so that goes along with like the Caesar, like, so I think that you do have to
Yeah.
kind of remove the self from the process. You have to put it into the making, but the finishing. And because anyone who's created, whether you're writing, a musician, is the initial like vomit, right? The thing you get first out isn't necessary. That's hopefully not the last iteration of the piece.
Yeah. Yeah. You really taught me a lot there too, because you answered it, but the follow-up question is, can make art making be egoless?
Mm, that's a good question. I think because you need ego for that initial creation. You really do. And then even from my perspective of writing is revision needs a bit of an ego too. So yeah, there's got to be ego in there.
Yeah.
Because if you're revising, I'm still, as I mentioned earlier, have a desire to be understood, and that is
Yeah.
pure ego.
Yeah, you are concise and articulate. That's really a pleasure spending this time with you. But I sort of use these examples. Ginger Baker, Cream drummer, says, "Where'd you get your sound from?" He says, "I was in London when they were bombing. Boom, 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 boom." But my favorite was the guy from Negative Land said, Missy Elliott was asked, "Where'd you learn to sing?" And she said, "Car alarms." I was like, whoa, because that you're supposed to say the church, and she says car alarms. That's amazing. that she learned how to sing from Carl Imes, and she can articulate that,
Yeah.
So, but then it's the other, you got deeper into it. It's sort of like Harold Bloom, anxiety of influence. You absorb your influence, then you abandon them. It's like, how do you abandon them? Good luck. I mean, you must know this, being a writer and an editor. How do dude, you're a clone of this writer. How does that happen where you can abandon your influence?
It's actually I've done I've done a little bit of ghostwriting too, and then some reworking. Sometimes books just, need a little help over the hump. And so to be able to do that though, you essentially have to, like an act of possession. You have to embody that voice, that writer's style, that, to do that thing. And to me, it's a rum joke. It's great fun to do
Yeah.
because you get to it, like, you shed one skin and you put on another. Um, and so I think, yes, absolutely, you can do that. You can, divorce. You can separate from that. It's a disassociation. Why not?
Yeah, that's good. Is perception reality?
Um, it's to the perceiver, absolutely.
Yeah. Lewis Carroll said, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
No, 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 I haven't, and that's to my detriment. And that I need to work on that for myself. I realize that is I need a little bit more awe and wonder. Um, I live really close to Lake Michigan, and it's a Great Lake. It's big. It's almost as big as the Black Sea. So anybody who's not near one of the Great Lakes, it's a big body of water. Um, and we've got bald eagles nearby, and I saw them, and I looked, and then I looked down and kept thinking about what I was thinking about. And I paused to realize, like, I was seeing a bald eagle in the wild in the city. And I needed to check myself a little bit so I can be in awe of the world. And I think, and that can be when you're, again, too much ego, too much work, not enough quiet time is, I think, more awe and wonder for myself is my own prescription. I'm working on that.
It's beautiful. You can articulate it. So tell me one major element of your creativeness that stayed the same and one major element that's changed in the years you've been being creative.
Um, the thing that's changed, it's the same as the writing. I've tried other things. I don't draw well. I've tried like other genres of art and making things. I can do conceptual art. I've done that, and that's fun. But the writing is a consistent thing. It is the place where I feel that, go back to the McLuhan, right? So that is where my brain is extended and where I
Yeah.
feel good to be.
Yeah.
I think what's changed is where I think about. I guess I've focused more energy instead of trying to be diffuse and multi talented, multi-genre, multi-anything, is to just I've given that up. So that's what I've abandoned, and in a good way, of
Yeah.
focus on the writing part.
Good. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Let's see. There's so many. Physical. I mean, I laugh because I have a fake knee. I broke my knees when I was 16, and
Wow.
I have a fake knee. And that one is much stronger. So from like the most like literal interpretation of this sentence, I am like much stronger on the leg with the fake knee. I can do party tricks like squats and hold weights, and because I work, so
Wow.
that is like that's the most literal interpretation. But the weak parts, I think that as a kid, I was a weird kid, and you can probably suss that out. Any of us who are
Yeah.
a little more nonconformist were the weird kids. And I think that in itself, which was considered a weakness in younger days, I wasn't playing with baby dolls and, playing house with all the girls in the neighborhood. And so, but that has become a strength over time as I, get as an adult. That is much more of a strength, is my odd brain.
I got to tell you, that was beautiful. Well put. I'm an etymology freak. I love to look up every word where it came from. And then, like my favorite is of unknown origin. Well, every word is of unknown origin. It's just some person researched and said this is where it probably came from. And one day I looked up weird, and I swear it said that the person has ESP. It's sort of like and then I started saying it. I go, I better look that up again. And I looked it back up, and it wasn't there. And I was like, what? My ESP worked in reverse, or I'm just too weird to remember correctly.
Well, and it's funny if you think about the English usage of WYRD, weird, which has then the connotations for like the esoteric, the mystical.
Yeah.
And so, weirdness can take so many forms, and
Yeah.
I'm proud to embrace being a weirdo.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when.
Well, you have to quote John Lydon and say anger is an energy.
Energy. That's right. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
Acculturation.
Yeah.
That's really truly the difference.
Yep. What caused matriarchy?
What causes matriarchy?
Yeah.
I think what causes matriarchy was when men are able to embrace their feelings and embrace their true selves and allowed to evolve in a way that is determined by their own self and not society. And then all of a sudden you get matriarchy because women, just in general, because of that acculturation, we tend to manage small projects really well, and life, homes, families, communities, those are all small projects.
Yeah.
So I think we do that a little bit better than men. And that's a combination of nature, nurture. So, people can argue with me on that. That's my opinion.
That's good. Utah Phillips said anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
I make my own rules.
Yeah.
And I choose to abide by societal rules. I think it rules more as a social contracts. They're social contracts. We're all stuck here together unless we choose to live a hermited life or, become house cats where somebody's just going to take care of our every need. Then we need our social contracts, which can result in rules. So I'm okay. I don't need anarchy because I'm making conscious choices.
Yeah. There's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated in the religion which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. Christina, how do you react to that? You create what you resist. And I'm not saying you, like one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
It's an interesting concept. The first word that popped into my head as you were saying it is Widerstand, the German concept of just small rebellion, of almost like a passive resistance. And so, as we create, I think we're definitely informed the antagonist, right? To have an antagonist, you don't get the protagonist without the antagonist, and so the hate can be that strong word, but I'm going to interpret it as an antagonistic impulse. So you need the yin and the yang.
Yes. In fact, Gurdjieff said laughter is a reconciliation of yes and no.
Oh, beautiful.
Isn't that great? How do you find peace of mind?
I find peace of mind when I have all my behaviors and words have aligned with my values. That brings me great peace of mind. I get internally a little like discombobulated if I, kind of feel like I've said or done something that isn't really aligned with what I truly believe. And that's the human condition.
Well put. Joyce invented that word, laugh tears. So he took laughter and added two letters, A and S. Well, A and S spell as. That's metaphor. All language is metaphorical, but I think that's the human condition. You laugh, then you cry. You fall, then you get back up.
Right. And laughter is so powerful. We kind of talked about it a little earlier, the power and the history of like the clown, the jester,
Yeah.
The joker. And because it is always in all of the fairy tales and mythologies, it is always the humor. It is always the fool who can speak truth to power.
That's it. But McLuhan loved to quote Steve Allen, behind every joke, there's a grievance. Even just drop the word every, just behind jokes, there's a grievance. What's your thought on that?
Absolutely, because it's a commentary. It's a commentary against the mainstream. Or or a personal affront then made big. And that's, I think, the great motivator for art. And that's where a lot of people who try to make art can often fail. And when we talked about ego earlier, is I can be personally offended by something, but I need to figure out a way to make that a universal, and how to communicate that. And comedians do it so very well, to take the one grievance, at an airport and make it such a universal experience that we both share that. We share that pain of the grievance because we've all experienced that type of grievance, and then can laugh at it. And then of course reduces and takes away its power.
Yeah. It's like Lenny Bruce when he's busted and the judge is saying what he said is against the law. He says to the judge, "You're doing my routine." You're ripping me off, dude.
Right. And that's always so funny too, is if you read through some like the most so-called offensive things, they're not really intentionally offensive.
No.
They're just like the BS that comes out of people, and mostly people in power, say ridiculous things because it's all just self-serving ego.
Oh, well, that's why please join us in any of our Finnegan's Wake reading clubs, because it's not always academic. It's normal people and just people who like to read books, and then they're like, well, Joyce is supposedly, and then eventually you get into reading Finnegan's Wake and you realize it's a bunch of poo-poo caca. And well, it's not just that, but you see all these legitimate kind of academic literati letting themselves bask in the kind of poo-poo caca legitimately because
Right.
Oh, well, it's James Joyce.
So there's a quote that I don't, you may know, that's been attributed to Joyce, that when someone asked him, what's the deal with Finnegan's Wake? And he had reportedly said that it was just a poor translation of a dirty French novel.
Wow, I don't know that, but I'll ask my a translation of a dirty French novel.
And it was kind of mentioned in concert because Joyce had known, I mean, not friendly, but was similar social overlap with Maurice, I butcher his last name, Giraudot from Olympia Press, who found they were in Paris at the same time doing things. And
who's how do you spell the last name?
Girodias. Girodias. And that's the great Olympia Press.
Yeah. No, I'll look into it. It's funny because I thought you were going to say the line, well, how'd you write Finnegan's Wake? He says, I didn't write it. The people over there talking at the coffee shop. And, I love the one, he just listened to shortwave radio in Paris and wrote it all down. So, it's endless. You get all these cute things. I mean, actually, a guy I had on my podcast spent 30 years writing a book, How James Joyce Wrote Finnegan's Wake. It's like, how pretentious can you get? But it is a great book.
It is.
And Sam Sloat, who edited it, brilliant Joycean. One person said he's the best on earth. And his line is from the Wake, he says, first we feel, then we fall. And I always get it mixed up. It could be first we fall, then we feel. I goes, it doesn't matter. It's both ways. But that's the line he pulls out of the Wake that summarizes the experience for him. And, Joyce came out of a lot. I'll tell you one in that regard is, you know what BVDs are?
I do.
Yeah. Well, he talks about underwear a lot, and it's got poop and all this stuff in it. And, it's in the wake. And I said, well, BBDs are Bruno, Vico, and Dante. That's who he ripped off. It's like, yeah, I'm going to take the underwear of the world and regurgitate it. Tristram Shandy is like another one. He just says, well, I can do this. So, I mean, he's definitely absorbing his influences and abandoning them pretty well because he's a pretty good writer,
Right. That's the synthesis.
That's
That's
it.
the great synthesis of ideas. And that is the hard trick to pull off, is how do you synthesize these things and make it your own? And
Your own.
and that, some people do it really well and other people, they don't.
Yeah, I can't find this quote, but my friend said in San Francisco in the paper or radio, they asked Zappa, what's a genius? And he says, it's someone who rips someone off and you can't tell who they ripped off.
Beautiful. See?
And that's T.S. Eliot. The mature poet steals and the immature poet imitates,
Yeah, there's so many variations on that kind of ideology. But it's really talking about, and I think the important takeaway is that the more you put in, the more influences you allow yourself to have, the more art, the more science, the more everything that you observe and take in, the better thinker you're going to be, the more raw material you have to synthesize, to work with.
Yep, it's good. 5 quick Alan Watts questions off the top of your head in just a couple words. 1, who started it all?
Oh, some dumb motherfucker.
There's been so many times I want to high-five you. That's one of the best answers I've ever had. You should hear the answers I give for that. Okay. 2, are we going to make it?
No.
3, where do we put it?
Now, my initial rude answer, is where are we going to put it? We're not going to put it anywhere because we don't keep really anything. We try. We're like dung beetles. We carry it around for a long time, and then when we die, it lays there. So it's not going anywhere.
Really? 4, who's cleaning it up?
Not me.
5, is it serious?
It's always serious, except when it's not serious, and then it's even more serious.
Jeez. Christina, Zappa said, I'm very serious about being not serious. Okay, a couple more and we're out of here. This has been fun. So if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
You should have shaved your head sooner.
That is cool. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
I already have it. It's the variation on the Bukowski. All the assholes in the world and you.
Oh, how cool. They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Oh, I know that smell. That is a terrible smell because it's a horse hide. It's a horse hide, hot glue on a hot day. It smells like a abattoir. It's awful.
Wow. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
I have a very specific. In Milwaukee, the fantastical home of Happy Days is on the Milwaukee River. There is a life-size statue of Henry Winkler as Arthur Fonzarelli, and it's locally known as the Bronze Fonz.
The Bronze Fawn.
I would like a little mini statue of me next to the Bronze Fonz.
Oh, how cool. And what's it made of?
It'll be bronze. It has to be.
Cool.
But it'll only be like 6 inches tall.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Look at how I made a great almost Freudian slip. I was about to say catastrophic wealth when I meant to say, kind of that untold wealth. Because I think that for me, my working class experience and has it played a large role into who I am today. And I don't want that. I don't want it. Glad I never had it.
Yeah, it's good. That's Balzac. Behind every fortune, there's a crime.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But the answers, that's one of my oldest questions too. I didn't make it up. Actually, tell me something good you never had and you never want. Is from NLP.
Oh,
Neuro linguistic program, and you
yeah.
watch which way their eyes go, and then you can determine something. I just like the question, but the three answers I get the most is money, fame, and heroin.
Ah, I would still take the heroin, I think.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Um, I would probably make a joke, honestly.
Yeah,
That's my personality. It was like,
yeah,
so that's what I would do. I would make a joke. 'Cause
yeah,
I'm an absurdist. I see the absurdity of just human existence, and
yeah.
so, yeah, that's an
I got
absurd situation.
Christina. We could go on forever. I got a couple ads because you said that. Mike Kelly, the great artist, when I asked him that, he said cry. And he also said this line, and I'm curious your reaction. Art is making your problems other people's problems.
That's very funny. It's funny for Mike Kelly. I wouldn't, I mean, I laugh at it, but, I don't
Yeah.
subscribe to the same belief.
Yeah. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
That inspires me. I love what some of the youngs, the kids, everybody's complaining about the kids. I love how they're so advocating for their relaxation, that
Yeah.
they're getting off of the corporate treadmill. There's a
Yeah.
book that's fascinating. It's right. I grabbed it because it's right next to me. It's called Free to Obey, and the subtitle. It's a translation from a French historian, and named Johann Chapoutot, and it's called How the Nazis Invented Modern Management. And it's essentially it's a I know,
Wow.
it's fantastic. And this whole modern American Protestant work ethic, productivity culture is legitimately through line goes back to, Nazi work camp management.
How the Nazis invented modern management?
Yeah, so it's like Free to Obey, How the Nazis Invented Modern Management.
How
Fantastic book.
cool.
Small
Yeah.
too. See?
You, you
Um,
know,
but that's why so that's inspiring to see. I
yeah.
know kids are like, the kids today don't want to work. And I'm like,
Yeah.
good, good, glad.
Chill out. Come on, man. That's one thing the subgenius culture taught us, that like chilling. My favorite thing is when people say, "What do you do?" I go, "I do nothing effectively." But I said that, I got to tell you, I said it in front of Cal Arts students, like 100 art students. I'm lecturing to them, and this girl, the woman in the front row goes, "What do you do for a living?" And I go, "I do nothing effectively." And everybody laughed. But she gave me an evil eye that will never erase from my head, because she knew, don't fucking bullshit with me. I want to know how you make your living. How do you pay your bills? And it was a powerful moment for me. But the other thing about the Nazis is they invented speed.
Yes, they did.
Like, yikes. Okay, what's a question that remains unresolved for you?
Um, I guess you asked a little bit about it earlier. The question of evil, of how do we as a society um, help each other, not
Yeah,
manifest evil. That's the
yeah,
question. That's the fascinating and also the question still unanswered for me. How do we do that?
yeah. How do we help each other is brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good. How has writing shaped your behavior?
It's made me less reactive because
Yeah,
of that learning the discipline to try to get your thoughts out in your head and make it make sense to not just yourself but to other people. So yeah, it's helped me become less reactive. So I only tried to interrupt you once. See, I've learned I can.
no, this has been pretty smooth. I mean, I get over anxious because I don't want to forget. I mean, I've taken 4 pages of notes, so
Oh,
that's why people go, dude, you're supposed to be looking at her. I'm like, I have to tell people sometimes I am paying attention, but I want to kind of remember things and write my notes down. So, um, Thornton Wilder in 1928 said, "Art is confession. Art is the secret told." But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
What is it about? It's about doing a little bit more to keep my block clean, to keep my stoop clean. Think of the old Dutch housewife metaphor, right? If everybody sweeps out in front of your own house, the whole street's clean.
Yeah,
So if I can subvert a little bit, if I can bring others' voices, that's the thing. That's what I
yeah.
do.
What gives you the most optimism?
The kids,
Yeah,
really, the kids that they're willing to still embrace transgressive art in all its forms. And I'll just say transgressive art is a time and a place, and transgressing against that thing of that time and place. It doesn't age well. It never does. But the kids are still doing it, and they're transgressing, and they're making art, and they're finding different ways to express themselves against the things that are annoying them today. And that's good. That John Waters said that too, right? That's the goal of every generation, is to piss off the one that came before them.
yeah. So articulate. That was good because when those women threw Campbell soup at the Mona Lisa, I'm like, yes, I am so happy. I don't like destroying art. I think that's okay, but everybody knows there's a piece of glass. It's the act of getting your picture in the newspaper for whatever your reason you're doing it. And to me, it was like, yes, I
Yes.
was like,
I agree with you. Yeah, you're going in, it's covered, it's fine. The painting is fine. It's okay.
but
Relax.
how did they get it in? That's what people like. How did they hide the Campbell's soup or the soup in a plastic bag, or was it in the can opened? That's what really gets me, is like, I want to
Yeah.
know the house.
Right. That's the great house. I mean, but I think I have to guess, because this is whenever I've done naughty things like that, is you just brazen it out,
Yeah.
because you think that people are paying attention to you. They're not.
No.
And so the best things are you just walk through brazenly and just do it. And then all of a sudden you have everyone's attention.
And what you said about transgressive art in time was important, because Martha Graham said, great artists aren't ahead of their times. They are their time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. If you're still creating or doing or something, the same thing you did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, you are lost. You've lost your path.
Well, this is truly one of the greatest interviews I've done in 40 years. I mean it.
Oh,
I mean, Christina, you are so articulate. When I saw your picture, I says, this woman has style. I was like, wow. So, first of all, I just have to ask you, are you for hire? Can I hire you to edit an article?
well, I have to say no. Not that you
Well,
wouldn't
I
bring up.
knew you were going to say that. Oh,
No, and
no
it's so
matter the price.
oh, yeah, right, that's the old joke, everybody's got a price. No, I'm so overloaded right now, I
Yeah.
have so much going on, but you should email me, I'd still be really interested in reading it, and then probably couldn't help myself but make a few notes.
Okay. Anyways, I'll send it to you anyways. But believe me, if you want to charge me whatever you charge, I'd pay, because I mean I'm
I have to say, comes like it's a very I've been asked this before. So running the company, I feel really empowered to
yeah,
do that, to get those things. It makes me actually really uncomfortable
yeah,
if I'm doing like a work for hire, somebody,
yeah.
because it feels like I would do it for free before I would do it for money,
I
because
and yeah,
the intention seems more just a little dirty that way.
I totally understand. So the first question is, what's the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. The last question is, what gives you the most optimism, is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people. And you said these other voices. It's really amazing, because it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it's you, Christina. Thank you so much.
Oh gosh, this is so much fun to do. I'm so appreciative that you asked me to do this. It's just been a joy.
Totally. And I will invite you into some of our salons. We do like a salon on progressive art and get people together. And so there's more voices, but really it's really fun to talk to someone who's concise and articulate, and at the same time teaching me a lot, because that's basically, I'm a student, and I love when my teachers are as great as you. Thank you so
Well,
much.
you're very welcome, and vice versa, baby. I learned a lot too, so I really did.
I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, but I truly hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.